Hello and welcome to another Warhammer Age of Sigmar video. Today we've got two new battle tomes up for pre-order, the Daughters of Khaine and the Head Knights of Slaanesh. So yeah, we have a video for each book going through all the new changes. So I'll link in the description the Slaanesh review if you want to check that out after this one. But yeah, first of all we're having a look at the Daughters of Khaine. Now these are probably one of the oldest books in second edition. So yeah, well deserved to get a new book to get them up to speed. Now they did have a few updates in the Broken Realms Morathi book. Those have been brought into this book along with a few other changes for some other units. So yeah, really cool. I've got a Daughters of Khaine army, and I've always wanted to do a snake based army with all the Melusai, and thankfully in that book this is something you can definitely do. So let's crack this open and have a nosy what's inside. So diving in, as ever, we get a good juicy lore section telling us all about the faction. This has been updated some since the previous battle tome and includes some of the storyline from the Broken Realms Morathi book. So we learn about Morathi's heist in order to get the material she needs in order to become a goddess, basically. And yeah, we learn what happens through this and her inadvertently releasing Slaanesh from his prison. So yeah, really cool. We also get a little bit of advancement after that as well, just talking about what happens following the events. So Anvilgard falls to the Daughters of Khaine, Morathi claims it as her own, and Sigmar's not too happy about this. So sends some Stormcast to go and sort it out. And yeah, it basically ends with Morathi and the Celestant Prime having a secret meeting. Nobody knows what happens, but at the end of it, basically the Stormcast retreat and leave the city in Morathi's hands. So I'm interested in seeing how that plays out. As ever, lots of gorgeous artwork, including some really nice like pencil illustrations. This is something we see in the Head Knights of Slaanesh book as well. And yeah, really, really nice. I hope we see more of this in the future. Some of it lifted from the previous book, but basically updates us with all the different factions and the various temples. We also get a couple of new temples. Zainthar Kai, that we saw in Broken Realms Morathi, which is based around all the Melusai and Harpies, and then Khelt Nar, who are kind of like hit and run tactics. So yeah, we'll see more about those later on when we get to the rules content. As ever, we get some nice spreads talking about all the various units in the book as well. So the usual stuff you'd expect from a battle tome, and a very pretty battle tome it is too. The artwork is excellent standard, as it always is for Games Workshop, along with some gorgeous shots of all the miniatures and the heavy metal painted miniatures. So yeah, very, very nice. We also get a painting section that has been updated. A lot of it is lifted from the previous guide, but we do get some new stuff. Guide on how to paint Morathi, which is really handy. A lot of this has been lifted from the previous books, but there's a few new things such as using contrast to get a quick and easy skin tone, and yeah, guides for each of the various factions of the Daughters of Khaine as well. It's a bit of a shame some of it's lifted directly from the old one, but I'm glad we haven't lost that information as well. So they've just expanded on this section and added some new things. So yeah, going into the rules content itself, there's not massive changes within the Daughters of Khaine. There's a few changes in some of the profiles and how some of the units work, but on the whole, the army works pretty much how it used to. With a few tweaks here and there. So they've still got the blood rights, you still get a different ability added each battle round, all cumulative, stacking on top of each other's. There's ways of moving those around as well, so one of the factions counts as being a turn later. I believe there's also a spell or a prayer that does the same, so yeah, there's ways of getting those a little bit earlier than you normally would. They also have an army-wide fanatical faith save. So essentially it's, think, disgustingly resilient. When you take a wound or mortal wound, roll the dice on a 6, you negate it, which is really cool. So very much like the save that the death models have. And since you're fairly fragile models, that does come in handy. And then yeah, you have temples. So you can choose to give your Daughters of Khaine army one of the temples. They will give it different benefits, but you are also tied into a specific trait and artifact for the first pick in those. Normally though, I'd say that the benefits of the temples outweigh the restriction of having to have those. That said, we do get some generic command traits if you do want to take them. Again, these are all very similar to the ones that we had in the previous book, so there's nothing massively different here. Increasing the wounds by 1, increasing bravery of nearby units by 2, add 1 to hit rolls with melee weapons, subtract 1 from hit rolls targeting them, add 1 to damage from each successful attack, and add 1 to the number of the current battle round when determining the abilities. For the Melusai general, you've got Arcane Mastery, reroll 1 casting, dispelling 1 and binding roll for the general. We've got Writhing Coils, subtract 1 from hit rolls that target them, and Fearsome Presence, reroll failed battle shock for friendly Daughters of Khaine while within 12 inches. And then finally we have some new ones for the Melusai Iron Scale, which is the new model added in the Shadow and Pain box. They have got Veteran of the Cathar Duel. If the general put your army on the battlefield, at the start of your hero phase on a 4+, you receive a command point, so pretty good for fueling command points, and the Iron Scale's got a really nice command ability that you're probably going to be using anyway. Impenetrable Scales, add 1 to save rolls, and Fueled by Revenge. Once per battle you can use the Wrath of the Scrathborn command ability without spending any command points. I'd probably take that rather than that, because you're probably going to get more command points over the course of the game, but yeah, so they're the generic ones you can take for anyone if you don't pick one of the temples. There's also some artifacts available. These again are very much the same as the ones in the previous book. I think there's a few little tweaks here or there. So the Crown of Woe subtracts 2 bravery, where I believe previously it was only 1 bravery it subtracted. The Shard Racer's Fang, pick one of the weapons, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with that weapon, and in addition, if the unmodified hit roll is a 6, it does a mortal wound in addition to any other damage. Pretty cool. The Amulet of Dark Fire, roll the dice each time you allocate a mortal wound to the bearer that was inflicted by a spell. On a 4+, the mortal wound is negated. Again, pretty cool. We've got the Chrome Blade, pick one of the melee weapons. At the end of the phase, if any models were slain by it, you heal up to D3 wounds. So nice little heal on your character. 1001 Dark Blessings, roll the dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to the bearer. On a 5+, it is negated. So in Sigmar that will be on top of the other save that you've got as well. Or is it? I think they may have changed that in the latest General's Handbook. Maybe not so good depending on which temple that you go for. And Bloodbane Venom, pick one of the melee weapons at the end of the combat phase. If any wounds inflicted by the attacks made with that weapon were allocated to an enemy model and not negated, basically if you can roll over their wounds characteristic, you just slay them. So yeah, that's pretty cool as well. The Bloodwrack Medusa also gets some artifacts. The Shadow Stone, add 1 to casting rolls. The Rune of Orgu, giving them an extra spell. The Mirror Glaive, they can attempt to cast a spell when they successfully unbind, which is really cool. So you can get a cheeky Mystic Shield up if you need to after taking out one of the enemy's spells. We've got the Sevenfold Shadow. This is pretty cool. You can basically redeploy them on the battlefield anywhere outside of 9 inches from any enemy units. The Crystal Heart, you can cast an extra spell. However, if you do, on a roll of 1, you suffer some mortal wounds, so a bit of a risky one. And the Shade Claw, it makes your Whisper Claw have a rend of -2, which is pretty nice. And then finally, we've got some relics for the Khainite Priests as well. So Blood Sigil, they know an extra prayer. Iron Circlet, you can reroll prayer rolls of 1. The Rune of Khaine, the first time they're slain by an attack, you roll a dice and you could do some damage back to the attacker. Crimson Shard, pick one of the bearer's melee weapons, add 2 to wound rolls. Pretty good. I don't know if a Khainite Priest is going to be in that much of a combat situation, but makes them better at combat. The Khainite Pendant, you can chant up to 3 prayers. However, much like the other one we saw earlier, if you roll a 1, you suffer D3 mortal wounds. And Hagbrew, add 1 to wound rolls for attacks made by melee weapons by the bearer. Again, we get a spell lore, the Lore of Shadows, and again, there's minimal changes here from the previous book, but there are some. So Steed of Shadows basically makes you fly and gives you a move characteristic of 16. Pit of Shades, you pick a unit and roll 2d6. If it's higher than the move characteristic, it suffers wounds equal to the difference. Mirror Dance has changed a little bit in how it works. You pick 2 friendly Daughters of Khaine heroes within 18 inches of the caster that are visible. You remove them, you place them anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy units, and they cannot move in the following movement phase. The Withering, you pick an enemy unit, add 1 to wound rolls for attacks that target that unit. Mind Razor has changed a little bit. You pick a unit of Daughters of Khaine within 18 inches of the caster. You improve the rend characteristic of their weapons by 1, and in addition, you add 1 to the damage if they made a charge in the same turn. So that's really cool. There used to be a restriction based on, I think it was the bravery of the unit. That's been removed now. They just do +1 damage if they charge. So really cool. And then the Shroud of Despair. You pick an enemy unit, you subtract 1 from their bravery. If it was an 8+, you subtract D3 from the bravery. So again, pretty cool. All the priests can also take a prayer as well. Again, not massive differences here compared to what we had. So Catechism of Murder, until the next hero phase, if the unmodified hit roll is a 6, it does 2 hits instead of 1. Got Blessing of Khaine, pick a friendly Daughters of Khaine unit within 14. Until the next hero phase, they can reroll Fanatical Faith roll, so that's basically a 6+ shrug. Martyr's Sacrifice, when a model in the unit dies on a 5+, it does a splash mortal wound basically back to them. Crimson Rejuvenation's a heal of D3 wounds. The Covenant of the Iron Heart stops you from taking battle shock tests. And then we've got Sacrament of Blood. Until the next hero phase, add 1 to the number of the current battle round when determining the blood rights. So again, that is a way of getting your blood rights up quickly. So onto the temples themselves. These have all had some changes in some form. They've all gained a command trait, an artifact and a command ability now, where they were kind of mixed across the different temples, with some being stronger than others. Hagg Nar was tending to be the kind of must pick for the Daughters of Khaine, but yeah, they've changed a little bit. So now their main ability is adding 1 to the number of the battle round when determining the abilities gained by friendly Hagg Nar units. So basically on battle round 1, they'll count as being in battle round 2 and get both abilities. Their command ability basically helps them move cauldrons up the battlefield. So if a cauldron is nearby a friendly Hagg Nar unit, you can add 3 to the move characteristic, which is pretty cool if you need to get your cauldrons into position. Their command trait improves their Fanatical Faith saves to a 5+ as well, which is really cool, while they're within 12 inches of the general. And their artifact of power, pick one of the bearer's melee weapons, add 1 to the damage characteristic. So yeah, pretty cool. So then we've got Drychi Ganeth. These are really cool. Improves the rend of melee weapons for Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter if they charge, so pretty cool. We've got their command trait, 1,000 blade forms. So command ability, basically you pick a unit of Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter within 12 inches, and they add 1 to hit rolls for attacks. So I think that was their old ability they had in the previous book, has now become a command ability. Their command trait adds 1 to the bravery of friendly units within 12 inches, and then finally their artifact of power, it adds 2 to the attacks characteristic of the weapon if they made a charge move. So that's pretty cool. The Kraith is a very Sisters of Slaughter heavy temple. So every Sisters of Slaughter unit can fight again on a 5+. Really cool. I think it used to be a 6+ for everything in the army, but now it's just Sisters of Slaughter. So 5+ is pretty good, especially if you go Sisters of Slaughter heavy. This is probably the temple you want to go for. Their command ability as well adds 1 to wound rolls for Sisters of Slaughter as well. Their command trait, if an enemy unit is taken out by a friendly Kraith unit, you get a command point, which is pretty cool because it'll fuel your ability here. And then their artifact of power, once per battle, basically you can do d6 mortal wounds rather than attacking. So a bit of a gamble, but it could be a spike of damage. You could take out a character with that maybe. So yeah, it's pretty nice. We've then got Calibron, who are kind of sneaky and covert. Their ability gives them -1 to hit with missile weapons. With the current shooting meta, pretty good. The command ability basically lets you teleport units around. Still have to say we're outside of 9 inches of enemy units, but really, really cool ability. Their command trait, -1 to hit with melee weapons that target the general. and their Artifact of Power basically does mortal wounds on hits of 6 with their weapon. We then have the new temple, Keltnar. So these are kind of like guerrilla warfare tactics, hit and run. So their ability Strike and Fade means you can retreat and charge, which is pretty nice. Command ability is an interesting kind of like buff on the unit. If you try and attack them and you hit them with a 1, you take a mortal wound. So deter people from fighting you with that. Their command trait is the Circling Flock, and this basically lets you summon a unit of harpies once per battle. Free unit, that's alright. And then their Artifact of Power, pick one of the bearer's melee weapons. If the unmodified hit for an attack with a weapon is a 6, it scores 2 hits, so exploding 6s. So yeah, they're pretty cool. And then finally we've got Zainthar Kai. These are exactly the same as they are in the Broken Realms Morathi book. But basically increases the bravery of your Melusai and Harpies. You get an additional Artifact of Power. There's a really good command ability where you can give a unit of Melusai or Qunari an extra attack each. Their command trait basically gets splash mortal wounds within 3 inches of the general. And then the Artifact of Power, the Crimson Talisman, subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target the bearer. So yeah, really, really good one. I'll probably go with these because I'm going to be snake heavy in my army. So obviously in most battle tomes you also get a bespoke battle plan. In this one, essentially the invaders are trying to destroy a ritual shrine, and using the blood fonts, the Daughters of Khaine can heal it up again. So it looks really fun. We also get Path to Glory rules. Don't think there's many changes from the previous ones. And then on to the War Scrolls. A lot of these return from previous books. So we've got this from the previous book. We've got the Cauldron Guard, Slaughter Troop and Shadow Patrol from the original battle tome. And then the Scath Coven, Viperic Guard and the Shrine Blood from the Broken Realms Morathi book. So no new ones, but some returning ones. So on to the profiles themselves. Now, some units have been changed quite a bit, some haven't really had many changes, so we'll just kind of look at the main differences. Morathi Khaine / the Shadow Queen, same profile that we've seen in Broken Realms Morathi, so you still get the 2 units on the battlefield. Basically Morathi Khaine transfers wounds to the Shadow Queen. Still really good caster, awesome combat unit, can give Melusai and Qunari units more attacks as well. We've got the Bloodrack Shrine and the Bloodrack Medusa. The range of the Bloodrack Stair has gone up a little bit, which is pretty cool. And Whisperclaw now does mortal wounds on hits of 6, so a little bit more punch there. Bar that, no massive changes across them. The Melusi Iron Scale is new, so that is the character out of Shadow and Pain. This is a really nice Melusai leader. She also unlocks Melusai as battle line, which is really cool, so it's really easy to do a snake heavy army now. She's really cool, she's got kind of like a spell shield effect. On a 5+, she ignores the effects of spells. She can also give +1 to the attacks characteristic of friendly Melusai if she kills something in the combat phase. So I'd recommend going with her first, try and trigger that. She's got Turn to Crystal. That's changed a little bit from the old incarnation of it. Basically, on a 3+, a unit within an inch will take a mortal wound at the end of combat. But I think in the old one, all the Melusai had a separate attack profile. They've kind of baked it into an end of combat ability now, which is easier to do. And then you've got command ability, Wrath of the Scathborn. Basically, you can make your Melusai run and shoot and charge, and they run 2d6 instead of d6. So really, really good. Get units quickly across the battlefield. Yeah, she's ace. We then have Morgwraith the Bloodied and the Blade Coven. This is the warband out of Warhammer Underworlds, and these are really cool. Basically, the Blade Coven can take wounds for her on a 2+. Other than that, she's pretty much a hag, and this whole group is cheaper than an individual hag. So I don't know if that's a mistake in the book and there's going to be a quick FAQ after it, but at the minute, I'd take these guys over a hag any day. Now you'll notice that Witch Brew has changed quite a bit. Previously, you used to get the reroll wounds just automatically for giving Witch Brew. So it was really easy to have big blocks of Witch Elves with 1,000,000 attack each, reroll on all hits, reroll on all wounds. That's going to be harder to do now. Base, you need a 5+ to affect it, and then you add 1 for each of the turn-based effects that come in. So Headlong Fury, Zealot's Rage, and Slaughterer's Strength. By the time you get to the 4th battle round, then it's going to be a 2+ to have the ability. So it's still good, but it's not guaranteed, and I think that's a much better change. The standard hags also see that rule as well. So yeah, I think they've basically taken... There's nothing the opponent could really do about stopping that Witch Brew. So I think they've just tried to rectify that a little bit by making it a bit easier to manage and not quite as nasty as it was previously. So personally, I think that's a pretty good change. We then have the Slaughter Queens. I don't think there's any massive changes on these either. A few little tweaks here and there, but essentially they're pretty much the same as they used to be. Onto the Witch Elves. These have had quite a change. So previously, with Frenzied Feather, they used to get an additional attack if they were within range of a Daughters of Khaine hero. That is now changed. They can instead add 1 to wound rolls, which is still really good, but again, moves away from the 1,000,000 attacks that the Witch Elves had. So one of the problems with the Daughters of Khaine was always those big blocks of Witch Elves. Just being able to roll buckets full of dice and re-roll them all. I think this has just toned them down a little bit. They're still really, really good. I mean, they're wounding on 3s now with that. They just haven't got the absolute bucket load of dice that they used to have. So I think that's a good change. I think it's good for the game. Sisters of Slaughter also haven't really had much in the way of changing. I think they've had a slight points increase, if I remember rightly, but nothing major there. Khainite Shadowstalkers are the new unit from Catacombs for Warcry. These guys are really, really nice. Basically, instead of moving, they can teleport anywhere on the battlefield outside of 9 inches of enemy units. So these are going to be really, really good for harassing objectives. They've got a really cool ranged attack as well that can do mortal wounds. It's only got a 6-inch range though, so you're not going to be able to teleport and fire that off. But yeah, and at the same points cost as a unit as Witch Elves, I can see people taking some Shadowstalkers for some movement shenanigans. Doomfire Warlocks have had a bit of love. They have got a longer range on their crossbows. They're generally better at wounding across the board. They also get +1 to casting now in units of 5 rather than units of 10. So they're a really good, really quick support caster unit. I quite like them now. Avatar of Khaine hasn't really had many changes. Only real thing that's changed is his ability to improve the rolls for prayers for Daughters of Khaine units. So yeah, not a massive change. Blood Sisters and Bloodstalkers, however, have been massively improved. The Blood Sisters in particular, they've got base 3 attacks, but with all the various buffs that we've seen in the book, you can get them up to 6 attacks. Hit on 3s, wound on 3s, -1 rend, 1 damage. Then at the end of combat you roll the dice for each of them, and each 3+ does a mortal wound. I can see Blood Sisters being really good now. Quick with that command ability that we saw earlier as well. Yeah, I'll be taking, to be fair, I'll be taking a full Snake Army. Likewise, the Bloodstalkers have had a bit of an improvement as well, with 2 shots on the bows now. So yeah, even a unit of 5 of them is pumping out 10 shots with a chance of mortal wounds. Yeah, I really like both those units. Then we've got Canary Life Takers and the Heart Renders. These now have a little stipulation in them that if they don't come down by the 4th battle round, they're destroyed. So you can't keep them in the sky and come down the 5th battle round to take an objective maybe. So you do have to commit them a little bit earlier. Again, they can also get quite a few attacks with some of the complementary buffs that we've seen elsewhere in the book. So the kind of, the Scathborn units, the Canary and the Melusai, I think we'll be able to make a really nice list out of. And then we get the new Endless Spells. Well, 2 Endless Spells and a prayer. So the Bloodrack Viper is a really, really cool spell. This goes off on a 7, and you roll 3 dice for a unit within an inch of it. Each roll that is over their wounds characteristic slays a model. So, you know, you can throw a 1 wound infantry unit and get 3 guaranteed wounds, or perhaps throw it at a 5 wound character. You've got 3 dice, so you've got a 50-50 chance of getting a 6 there. Likewise, elite cavalry with 4 or 5 wounds, again, you've got a good chance of taking out a big chunk of that unit, so really, really like that spell. I'll probably be sticking that in my list. Blade Wind's pretty nice as well. This one can basically do mass mortal wounds to everything that it passes, D3, so a little bit of damage here and there. In addition, it negates cover as well, so if you've got an opponent that's dug into some cover, throw that near them and they no longer get the benefit. So yeah, that's pretty cool too. The most powerful one is probably the Heart of Fury. Now this is an invocation, so like we've seen with the Fire Slayers and the Khorne book, they can basically do a prayer and get this invocation summoned to the battlefield. Really cool. It's expensive, I think it's 80 points, but if it goes off, it basically reduces the damage taken of Daughters of Khaine units by 1 in a 12-inch bubble to a minimum of 1, but that combined with the fact that you've got a wound shrug anyway can really reduce a lot of the damage coming in, especially from, say, damage to weapons. It kind of negates that bonus that they've got. So yeah, really like this one. If there's an Avatar of Khaine on the board as well, it's more likely to stick around, otherwise there's a chance that it kind of dissipates at the end of the turn. But yeah, really like the Heart of Fury, and I'm glad that they've got a combination of spells and prayers, so really fun. And then we've got the points values. There's quite a few points changes. The cauldrons, all the cauldrons have come down in points, which is cool, so we should start to see more of them in battles. Equally, all the large regiment bonuses are gone. Now, I don't know if this is a trend that maybe we'll see going forward and they're moving away from that, but you're no longer penalised for taking small units of Witch Elves, for example. So yeah, the Bloodstalkers I think have gone up slightly in points, just to reflect the fact that they've got an extra shot on their bow. I think the Blood Sisters have come down a little bit. But yeah, there's some decent points changes. On the website, I've done a full write-up as kind of companion piece to this review, and I've detailed all the points changes and all the individual details that I've changed in there. So if you do want more detail on that, check out the website. I'll put a link in the description of the video. But yeah, that's a quick look at the Daughters of Khaine Battle Tome. I really like this book. I think we're going to see some new interesting lists rather than blocks of 30 Witch Elves supported by hags. Really excited to see what people do with the different temples as well. I think we've got a lot more options now for some fun lists. So yeah, really cool book. Like I said, also today we have got the Head Knights of Slaanesh book review up, again on YouTube and on the website, so please check that out. But until next time, we will see you later.